Myst Island was an age created by Catherine and Tiana for Catherine and Atris to live in to be safe from Gen. Atris had trapped Gen in Riven and linked to Myst as the book fell into a fissure. There, he, Tiana, and Catherine lived together. While on the island, Atris and Catherine had two sons, Achenar and Cyrus. Eventually, Tiana dies and is buried by Atris on the island. Atris writes many ages while on the island. He claims over 100. While many were eventually destroyed by Achenar and Cyrus, he had created 4 places of protection where he kept 4 of his books. Each of these safe places was protected by a puzzle that one would need to complete in order to access it. Eventually, Atris left Myst Island and returned to Kavir, with a linking book this time. Atris was trapped on Kavir and burned so many of his books. In the following 10 years after those events, Atris and Catherine rarely returned to the island. In truth, they were avoiding it, as its current condition caused them much anger and grief, being reminded of the betrayal, cruelty and greed of their sons. Atris also felt partly responsible for them, as he did not reach out to the boys when he should. As a pretense to avoid the island, Atris occupied himself with writing ages like Averone, then with searching the ages of Denis for survivors, postponing the visit to Myst. Eventually, Atris had to visit Myst again in order to explore his old ages, seeking inspiration for the new age he was writing to relocate the Denis people. Catherine also visited Myst later, and brought Atris the Book of Jananin to help him. Years later, Yisha returns to Myst Island and closes the library forever. Myst eventually fell into decay after being unattended for 250 years. All mechanisms on the age have been rendered functionless by time and weather. Emmett was the first inhabitant of the rocks who lived in a cave in the largest rock and swam between them. He was joined by Branch. The two became friends and hunted fish together, and Branch found a cave in the same rock as Emmett. One day, Branch found a third boy, who apparently had no name, and joined the group. He was named Will by Emmett. They seemed to have little concern about how they got there. The boys seemed to know nothing of civilization. Atris wrote the age as a group of rocks in the middle of the ocean. When he appeared in the world, he surprised the 3 boys, but by that night, they became good friends. It seems that the age's creation and/or Atris's arrival triggered some strange phenomenon, as the next morning, as Atris was sitting under a tree, it rained for the first time, which lasted for an hour. The boys were afraid, and Atris attempted to explain to them that it was not harmful. That night, he promised a surprising change. Wishing for a means to explore the age, Atris linked out and attempted to write a boat in it, testing the limits of the rules of the art. However, Atris was not yet experienced enough, so something went wrong and the ship was merged with one of the rocks and broke in half. Nonetheless, this mistake helped Atris understand some of the principles of the art he had no answers for. The boys enjoyed it and played around it. It also offered a stable platform from which Atris studied the age, its solar system and the constellations of the night sky. He also noticed glimmers of light from the horizon which he suspected were other additional people on far-off islands or rocks. Just as the boys were getting used to the light rains, a small storm inexplicably arrived, which frightened them with the thunder and lightning. Atris left and returned with construction material in order to build a lighthouse whose light would flock people. Neighbors would be discovered from beyond the horizon and contact established. The boys helped Atris immensely. After more than 3 weeks of work, and some small alterations due to the instability of the rock they were building on, the structure was complete, and the boys were impressed by their own work. That evening they powered the generator, which frightened them, and Atris slept in the top while the lighthouse shined a light for hours. Will noticed a girl swimming towards them, and then a man, and Emmett was happy. So was Atris for helping an age to evolve with his achievements, and proceeded to explore a new oceanic age. While Atris was absent, the boys grew up, and a new civilization formed and flourished. They discovered new materials, including gold. They also tried to keep the lighthouse in perfect condition, although the rock it was built on sunk 40-50 cm. Rains continued for another 4 years, but then they stopped, and the cool breezes were back. After 10 years of absence, Atris returned to visit his old friends and was amazed at the changes. The people were content and served Atris with new foods and showed him their discoveries. Before leaving, he wondered aloud with them what things will be like in another 10 years. However, it seems that Cirrus and Achenar plundered the age, and eventually it was deserted. Stoneship's fair weather was replaced with constant storms and rain. The lighthouse had sunk enough that most of it, with exception of the top floor and a landing just below, were underwater. Atreus found the age different from the others he wrote, even from what he expected or imagined while writing it. He enjoyed the change of temperature despite the extreme cold, and stood in awe of the never-ending snowstorm, but found the natural silence suffocating. After 3 visits, Atreus decided that the low temperature will provide the necessary environment for obtaining the correct resonance of crystals for an instrument for viewing across ages. He began construction with the help of his sons. Achenar chose to stay with Catherine, but Cirrus was excited to come, enjoying the cold and ice and intrigued with the crystals they brought. He proved to be very willing and a tremendous help. Of particular interest to Cirrus was the periodic polar aurora. When the tunnel was close to completion, Atreus set up a temporary space to protect the crystals from stimulation and also employed geodes for stabilization and clearer frequency. Eventually, he managed to capture a blurry image within a book. He then resumed finishing the shaft to the observation post. Later, Atreus became tired by all his plans and longed for his family. While there, he dreamed of Denis and wondered whether he could find survivors to rebuild it, but he would not return, unless he was sure that Gen was trapped in Riven for good. Eventually, he managed to view another age using the crystals and started experimenting with Riven. With the help of both his sons, Atreus managed to almost finish the shaft and the observation post, which was much loved by Achenar, while Cirrus was consumed with studying the crystals and the ages. After much experimenting with the crystal shapes, a nearly perfect view of an age appeared, and the brothers were excited that they could see channelwood or stoneship, but the correct combination would require much experimentation by Atreus. The brothers were much more interested in the aurorae, and in order to keep them excited and with him, Atreus considered triggering the effect artificially. Over 3 weeks, he and his sons erected electromagnetic towers for this purpose, and managed to create flashes of white lightning resulting to multicolored waves of light. The awe-inspiring beauty was so impressive that they considered persuading Catherine to come and witness them. Eventually, Catherine was persuaded to come, with the hope to view Riven in the crystal viewer, and encouraged Atreus to uncover the combination. Atreus eventually left for Everdunes to fetch some crystals he left there. They were able to succeed in both making the crystals orient with other ages, and eventually to get Riven to appear in the viewer. Following the escape and recapture of Gen, Atreus visited Rime in order to watch his sons in Spire and Haven, but he couldn't always see much, and decided to redesign the viewer to achieve a tighter image. After some preliminary tests, he considered making a new viewer in Tomana, artificially inducing cold temperatures. During his stay there, the aurorae made him remember the old times when he constructed the towers with his sons. The modified version of the crystal viewer is located in Atreus's laboratory in Tomana. Atreus considered to take some attachments from Rime in order to make his new viewer change points of view. He went to Rime to pick some parts, but he was stranded in a snowstorm.